In the year 1979, a group of policemen arrive at a local farm where they find a dozen bodies strewn about the grounds. In the background, a television set is running, and a preacher on the screen speaks of the youth of today who are awaiting the punishment of heaven for their sins. Looking at the scale of the unknown maniac's crime, the police realize that sorting out this madness will be very difficult. Then, the director takes us back 24 hours, where we meet the main characters: aspiring movie star Maxime Meeks, her boyfriend, ambitious producer Wayne, a narcissistic and very experienced actress named Bobby Lynn, actor Jackson Hole, director RJ, and his conservative girlfriend, sound engineer Lorraine. This whole bunch is off to Texas to shoot their movie called Farmer's Daughters. Along the way, they diligently study the script and chat about their dreams, and they also stop at a gas station and buy everything they need to work and rest comfortably. RJ checks the camera, Bobby Lynn jokes about the shy Lorraine, and Maxime dreams of being a superstar. In traffic, they encounter an accident where a cow has been hit. Finally, they arrive at a farm where an elderly couple, Mr. Howard and Mrs. Pearl, live. But our heroes are not welcome here at all. As soon as Wayne appears on the doorstep, Mr. Howard immediately points a gun at him. This grandfather rents out his farm. He's not very friendly, but he does eventually show our company his property and gives the group a place in the guest house. On the way to the house, Maxime notices that someone is watching her intently from the window, and it really scares the girl. Mr. Howard leaves, ordering the uninvited guests to behave themselves and stating that he does not like anyone here. The characters immediately shoot the first scene, where the farmer's daughter meets a lost Marine whose car is broken down and he is looking to make a phone call. The girl calls the guy into the house, treats him to some lemonade, and offers to take advantage of the moment. Maxime goes out for a walk and looks around the area. The girl goes to the lake, where Mrs. Pearl and the local alligator are watching her. She manages to get out of the water before the alligator reaches her, but she meets a creepy Mrs. Pearl on the doorstep. Granny invites the girl in and treats her to some lemonade. She tells him that she was a talented dancer when she was young. The girl is about to leave, but Mrs. Pearl suddenly begins to touch her. Saving the girl from such an awkward situation is the sudden return of Mr. Howard. Maxime runs to the guest house and falls into Wayne's arms. It's time for the girl to participate in the filming of the next scene. She kisses her boyfriend and shows off her talents. In the stable, Maxime plays a shy girl milking a cow, and Jackson finds her. Maxime immediately puts down a bucket of milk and smiles gently at him. Mrs. Pearl watches Maxime and Jackson's shooting from behind the window of the barn. Impressed by what she sees, she imagines herself in Maxime's shoes. Mrs. Pearl invites her husband to remember his youth, but he refuses because of his age and weak heart. In the guest house, the crew celebrates the end of the first day of filming. The actresses explain to the humble Lorraine that they share love and work. When the camera turns on, it's no longer cheating. Lorraine, who previously did not much approve of this genre of cinema, suddenly changes her mind and wants to participate in one of the scenes. RJ is against it at first, but eventually agrees. Lorraine prepares to shoot, and RJ shakily shoots a scene where she has fun with Jackson. After a busy day, the actors and cameramen fall asleep. Only RJ can't sleep. He remembers the sight of his girlfriend with Jackson and becomes furious over the betrayal. He is so upset and disappointed that he decides to drive home in their shared van. But Mrs. Pearl appears in the driveway in the headlights. RJ asks his grandmother if she needs help, and she starts pestering him. But the guy is not very interested in a woman who is old enough to be his grandmother, and he refuses Mrs. Pearl. The offended granny grabs a sharp object and sends the cameraman to the other side. At this time, Lorraine wakes up looking for her boyfriend along with Wayne. The girl visits the old men at their house, and the director goes to the barn where the scene was filmed. Wayne accidentally steps on a board nail on it, swears and falls. He pulls the nail out, limps to the wall as he hears some sound from there and thinks it's RJ. Wayne looks out through some crevice and gets the villas. Granny appears in the barn in a stained dress, holding the villas, and covers Wayne with a straw. Lorraine encounters Mr. Howard, who informs her of Mrs. Pearl's missing and unstable condition. He sends the girl to get a flashlight in the basement of their house. There, Lorraine finds the flashlight and goes back, but the door to the cellar turns out to be bolted from the outside. Turning on the light, she discovers a man's body inside. Jackson and Bobby Lynn wake up to the noise and meet Mr. Howard. He asks for their help in finding his missing wife and warns them of the presence of alligators. The men set out to find Mrs. Pearl. Jackson finds a flooded car and hears sounds, thinking it is Mr. Howard, but finds no one. He meets Mr. Howard alive and unharmed. The old man declares that their camera crew is not the first people to try to ruin his poor wife. After this, he takes Jackson's life, and we realize that these old men are accomplices to all the crimes. Meanwhile, Mrs. Pearl enters the guest house and lies in bed next to the sleeping Maxim. The girl wakes up, sees the old woman, and screams. Her friend's wild scream wakes Bobby Lynn, and she sees the old woman emerge from the guest house with no clothes on. Maxim sobs and complains to the blonde about the nightmare she has experienced. At this time in the basement, Lorraine finds an axe among various tools and breaks through the door. She opens the deadbolt, but is hit in the fingers by Mr. Howard, who forces her back into the basement and drowns out her screams with the television. Bobby Lynn is looking for Jackson and Wayne. She finds a naked Mrs. Pearl on the dock and tries to help her. However, a jealous grandmother insults Bobby Lynn and pushes her into the lake, where she becomes a victim of an alligator. Maxim sees Mrs. Pearl and Mr. Howard returning to the guest house, so he hides under the bed. The couple discuss their crimes and then decide to indulge each other after all, on the same bed where Maxim is hiding. Unable to listen to this, the girl climbs out from under the bed and runs to the van. There she sees evidence of RJ's abuse and hears cries for help from the basement. Maxim takes the gun and frees Lorraine. The girl blames Maxim for what happened and runs out the front door in a panic. However, she is wounded by Mr. Howard. Lorraine shows no signs of life, and Howard and Pearl decide to drag her into the house. As the pair begin to move the girl's body, she suddenly lets out a wheeze. A frightened Howard immediately has a heart attack and goes to the next world. At this time, Maxim attacks Mrs. Pearl, demanding the keys to the van. Maxim discovers that the keys are in the kitchen under a lamp. Maxim takes the car keys and tries to fire a shot in Mrs. Pearl's direction, but realizes that the weapon is not loaded. Mrs. Pearl shoots back, but misses and breaks her hip as she falls. She asks for help, but Maxim ignores her pleas and gets behind the wheel. Hearing swearing and cursing at her, Maxim uses the van to send the old woman into the other world and drives away from the farm. We are taken back to the beginning of the movie, where the police wander around the farm, hoping to figure out what has happened here after all. It turns out that Maxim is the daughter of a famous preacher whose speeches were often shown on television by Pearl, and the cops find RJ's camera and are very surprised by what they see. That's all for today. Subscribe and like it if you want more videos like this.